In Unit 8, we talked about how Constantinople was taken away from the Christians of the Byzantine Empire by Muslims who practiced Islam, but we didn't talk about what Islam really was. So, welcome to Unit 9, everything you ever wanted to know about Islam. And we have to, of course, start with the founder of Islam, who was a man by the name of Muhammad. His people often call him the Prophet. And according to Muhammad, he was approached by the Archangel Gabriel, which is a Christian, also known in the Christian world. So Islam and Christianity have a lot of similarities. People don't like to hear that sometimes, but it is absolutely the truth. So the Archangel Gabriel came to Muhammad, according to Muhammad, and he was told by Gabriel to go out into the world and proclaim this new religion called Islam. So it's considered to have been founded in 622 AD, so 622 years after the birth of Christ. This new religion emerges. And he really truly is going to devote his entire life to the spread of Islam. And you're going to find out that it spread very quickly, just as Christianity did. And we'll talk about why. Now, I have to bring this up because I don't practice Islam, so sometimes I'm stupid about things that I don't live with every day of my life. And so I had a Muslim student that took one of my classes, and I told her in advance, if there's something you would like me to add or something I get wrong, please tell me. I learn something new every day from my students. So I used to have a drawn rendition of what Muhammad was supposed to look like, and she asked me to take it down because you're not supposed to show a picture of Muhammad, even a fake artist rendering of it. And so I took it down, and that's why usually I show you a picture of the people I'm talking about, but she said that you're not supposed to do that, and Muslims don't appreciate when you do that. So that's why we do not have a picture of Muhammad. Let's learn a few basic facts about Islam. The word Islam itself means submission. The followers of Islam are known as Muslims, which means one who submits to Allah. And who's Allah? Allah is the Arabic word for God. Allah is the only God of Islam, so they are monotheistic, just like Christians. See, I told you, we have a lot in common. Islam begins in Saudi Arabia on the Arabian Peninsula, and the very first holy city for Islam is Mecca. Now, the problem was at this time, Muhammad was in Mecca when the angel came to him and told him to go proclaim. But in this time, Islam was not well received in Mecca at all, to the point where Muhammad actually feared for his life. So he decides to save himself and to save this new religion that he must leave Mecca, literally run from the city, and he ran north to what is now the second holy city of Islam, and that is Medina. Both of them are located on the Arabian Peninsula, and the Arabian Peninsula is everything you see outlined in red. Now, they do have a third holy city, so make sure you know Mecca and Medina. Their third holy city is not on the Arabian Peninsula, and it is a city that most of you probably have heard the name of, I hope, Jerusalem, which is today located in modern day Israel. Today, Jerusalem is a shared city because it is holy to Jews, to Christians, and to Muslims. They all consider it to be holy. They all share it. And the reason that Muslims consider it to be a holy place is because of this building here. This is the called the Dome of the Rock. It is the oldest surviving mosque in the Muslim faith. So this is a very important building to Muslims. It's not by far the biggest mosque at all. Wait till I show you pictures of modern day Medina and Mecca in a little bit. But it is the oldest surviving one. So this is a very important building to Muslims. Now let's look at some of the details. The day of worship for a Muslim is Friday. Any of these symbols with the moon and the star is considered to be representative of the Muslim and the Islamic faith. So notice that you can change it a little bit. Christians change the cross up and stuff. It's the same type of thing. So it's the moon and the star together, or the crescent and the star, but you can flip it upside down and turn it backwards and make the star prettier and whatever, and that's okay. Now, the holy text is the Quran. You can see both spellings for it up here at the top. Both are correct. They're both pronounced Quran. Now, the Word of God, according to the Quran, is handed down and recorded by Muhammad. So, unlike the Christian Bible, this book is the Word of God. Like he dictated what Muhammad should write in this book. Instead of it being humans who wrote, like the Bible, this is the Word of God, and a human transcribed it and put it down into the book, the Quran. It is primarily written in Arabic. And there you have a picture of Arabic. And this is what a Quran, a page in a Quran would look like. Qurans are beautiful. They are made with such great detail. You can get small ones, you can get gigantic ones, you can have them laminated in gold plate like the one that you see here. It can look like an ordinary book. And very often, well, I can't say very often, always, if you walk into a Muslim household, the Quran is going to be on display and it's going to be open because they read the Quran. The whole family takes turns or does it together reading the Quran every day. So it is a very active part of their life. This is the biggest one that I could find, and I don't know if this guy's like made it or what the story is behind it, but this one's huge. Now, it used to be that you could not touch the Quran with your left hand. Your left hand was considered not clean when you used the restroom. That was the hand that you used to clean yourself, and so it was an unholy hand, I guess you could say, and so you were never allowed to touch the Quran with your left hand. Now, that isn't as prominent as it used to be, although some sects of Islam still practice that, and it used to be the ultimate punishment for a thief to have their right hand cut off because you could no longer read the Quran, like that you lost that very significant part of your life because you didn't have a right hand to touch it and you weren't allowed to touch it with your left hand. So, very interesting. A Muslim's place of worship is called a mosque. And the very first mosque, of course, was located in Medina, not Mecca. Remember, Mecca's the first city, but the first mosque will be located in Medina. That mosque has been destroyed. That's why the Dome of the Rock is so holy, because the first mosque built in Medina was destroyed long ago. So the Prophet's Mosque is the one that is in Medina today. It is huge, and it's called the Prophet's Mosque because Muhammad's body is located in a tomb inside that mosque. So Medina's mosque is the Prophet's Mosque. Don't get that confused with the one I'm going to tell you in a little bit. And here's a picture of it. People come day and night. You see all those little white dots? Those are people. It is always, always that crowded. Look at this at night. All those people there. Absolutely beautiful. So this mosque, look how different it is from the Dome of the Rock. Beautiful, beautiful place. Much, much bigger, but still not as celebrated as the Dome of the Rock because of the age. Now inside there are remnants of Muhammad. They have this box containing one of his last teeth, his footprint. I love this. Hair from his beard inside of a magnifying glass. And some of the swords on the golden gate of his tomb. And then there's the tomb itself. So very, very beautiful and very visited. So how are the three monotheistic religions related? All have traced their roots back to Abraham. So Abraham is the father of all of them. Not the founder, but the father. All recognize Moses, Abraham, and Jesus as prophets. So even though the Jews do not believe that Jesus was the Messiah and the Muslims do not believe that Jesus is the Messiah, they all three recognize Jesus as a very important individual that truly did live. Nobody's saying he didn't. And these are the three men, historical men, that tie these guys together. So all of them, the father, all three, is Abraham. And then, of course, you have the founder of Christianity is Jesus Christ, and the founder of Islam is Muhammad. So founder and father, different things. But just make sure you know that they all trace their roots to Abraham, and they all believed Abraham, Moses, and Jesus to be very important prophets in their religion. So they do have an acceptance of that Judeo Christian prophets in Islam. I told you there's a lot of similarities. So let's look at some of the details of being Muslim. What does it mean to be Muslim? It means that you have to practice what we call 5 pillars of Islam. And the first one is declaration of faith. The second one, daily prayer. Third is alms or charity to the poor, fasting during Ramadan, and Hajj to Mecca. So there they are all together if you want to write them down. I'm going to talk about each one of them individually. So if you want to wait, you can do it that way, or you can pause it and write all 5 down now. So the first one, declaration of faith. So you bear witness. Probably some of you have practiced this in your own faith. If you're Muslim, you go to the mosque and you out loud say, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. So you're declaring your faith out loud at the mosque. And this is how you would say it in Arabic. I'm not even going to try because I would just do a butcher job on it. But some of you might know how to say it. So there's a testimony of faith that you say, and it translates to there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. So the second is daily prayer. So you pray at least 5 times a day. You have to face the holy city of Mecca to pray, and it isn't just a drop to your knees kind of thing. You see this boy off to the side. It's a process. And there are two different, well, there's more than two, but there are two different ways of believing in this 5 times a day. There are certain Muslims that believe that you have to pray a specific time 5 times a day. There are other groups in Islam that believe that you can basically work your schedule around your life. So I had a Muslim boy who was a football player, and I asked him, does that ever interfere with your daily prayer? And he said, no, as long as I can, pray 5 times a day, I just work it into my schedule, and that's okay. But we're in the town that I live in, there are groups from both versions of belief, because we very often there's this gas station where I live where this group of Muslims, I guess they're on their way to work. I don't know because I see them quite often, but they're actually out in the parking lot doing their daily prayer in the morning when I'm driving to work. So I think that they have to be like on a schedule. So the thing about facing Mecca, I asked this Muslim student that I had, this first one that I had, how do you guys figure that out? And she said, I'll be honest with you, we hate it whenever mom says, hey, I found a better apartment or a bigger house, we're moving, because then it takes us hours to figure out in each room of the house where Mecca is. So it really is a process. It's not just we're going to pretend we're facing Mecca and we'll face in that general direction. Like, they actually have to figure it out. I thought that was very fascinating. So they do, especially in places that are predominantly Muslim, they pray together very publicly. When the bell tolls it's a bell that tolls, and you also have a guy that like calls it out. It's a really kind of eerie, beautiful speech, I guess, that he's giving, or shout out that he's giving. And when you hear that, you go out into the street if you're not going to the mosque, and you do it very, very publicly. So that's the big thing about being a Muslim. It is very public. It is very like wearing it on your chest proudly. I am Muslim, and I show this at least 5 times a day, and I read the Quran every day. So it's a very visible faith, more than any faith that you can think of. This one is very, very visible. And most people have a prayer rug that they take with them. The students that I have that are Muslim bring theirs with them. One of the students told me that it's a very personal choice to have your prayer rug. When you are old enough to pick out your own prayer rug, it's like a big deal. It's a rite of passage, and so it is a very personal and loved belonging of Muslims. And here's a couple other examples. So very, very different depending on whose it is. Now, the third pillar is charity or alms, and it is considered a duty for all Muslims to give 2.5% of their income to charity, which is that's a big deal, especially in a country that's often very, very poor. Many different types of people will set up places along the streets. See these little kids, and they will do tricks or read poetry or make something for you, and you're supposed to give them some kind of charity. And to walk by without giving them anything is considered disrespectful. So the 2.5 isn't necessarily it. You don't pick a charity, for example, and every paycheck you give 2.5 to that charity. You're constantly, if you are Muslim, giving to the poor. It's expected of you to walk past these people and put something in their bowl. So a very giving, loving community among the Muslims. The fourth pillar is something called Ramadan. And this is the ninth month in the Muslim calendar, which is different from ours. And if you practice Ramadan, you can't eat or drink between sunrise and sunset. So you fast during daylight hours, and then in the evening, then you can eat and drink and make up for it. So you practice this for the entire month. I, I know this sounds stupid because I'm stupid about Islam. I don't practice it, but it's sort of like Christmas for Christians. So you can get cards for people celebrating Ramadan, and it seems kind of Christmassy, like this one, Ramadan wishes, like an electronic Ramadan wishes. But this is a very, very serious month for these guys. And this is a problem for Muslim boys who play sports because they can't eat or drink all day long. And there are some Muslim communities across the United States, at least, I'm sure it's other places in the world too, where the football team actually they reverse the school day so that the kids go to school and play sports at nighttime so that the boys can eat and drink, and the girls too, so that they can eat and drink and replenish themselves after playing a game. So they're very, very dedicated to Ramadan. They do not take it lightly, and they don't just say, that doesn't fit into my life, I'm not doing that. They make it fit into their life. And there's another one, looks very, very much like a Christmas Christian type of thing. Now, the fifth and final pillar of Islam is the Hajj. And this is a pilgrimage to Mecca that every Muslim is supposed to make at least once in their life. Now, many of them do it much more than one time, but it is a requirement for every Muslim to go at least one time on the Hajj to the Great Mosque in Mecca. And the only excuse to not go is if you are physically unable or financially unable. And more than likely, if you're financially unable and you tell people, they will come together and help you find a way to get to Mecca. It's that important. So Mecca is the most holy place because it's the birthplace of Muhammad. It's the birthplace of Islam, and it is the location of the Great Mosque. So Mecca is the Great Mosque, Medina is the Prophet's Mosque. Now, when you get there, once you get to the Great Mosque, you wait in line, and when you get your turn, you go into this giant, giant room, and all those little white dots you see are people. And you line up and you go around this black box called the Kaaba. You go around it 7 times. 7 times you have to go around this box. Now, the Kaaba is believed to have been actually built by the hands of Abraham and his son Ishmael. Inside that Kaaba is a giant black rock that supposedly came from the Garden of Eden. And while it was in the Garden of Eden, it was pure white, and God gave it to Abraham. It had been turned black by the sins of Adam and Eve's sons. So that's how it became a black rock. Super, super holy thing. So you circle the Kaaba 7 times, and then you end up here at this little piece of the black rock that is showing to the public, and you kiss the black rock or you rub it. And so I wish I had a better picture of it, but it has actually become concave because so many people have touched it or kissed it. It's rubbing it, inward. So a lot of it has disappeared from so many hands touching it. And here you have a better idea of the crowds. So you've got all these people that have to circle it together 7 times, and you end up there at different times. So I don't know how you couldn't lose your count, but just massive numbers of people. Look at this picture, inside and out, and there are people waiting, waiting, waiting. You can see the Kaaba there in the middle. Look at the rows and rows and rows of people waiting their turn to go into the room where the Kaaba is located to do their 7 circles. I mean, it just seems like you'd be there for days and days and days. But this is a great show of faith, and this is constant. I told you, it's a very public faith. Muslims are adamant that this whole area, the Great Mosque and the Kaaba itself and the area around it, remain absolutely pristine. So you can't put off cleaning it, even with these giant, giant crowds here. So the Kaaba itself, the material, the curtain around the outside is sort of like not satin, but a felt type of thing. And so it is exposed to the elements. So they change it once a year at the cost of $100,000 once a year. And the ground itself, where people are walking, they have to keep that clean as well. So this cleaning crew moves with the people circling. And if you want a really good look at it, go look on YouTube. You'll have to type it in because the link's not going to work on my video. But if you want to pause this and type that in, it's neat to watch all of these people circling and the cleaning crew kind of going with them, and they rope off one section at a time. And the cleaning crew is like a military procession. They come in with these mops and brooms and electronic scrubbers, and they all work together very, very quickly to get out of everybody's way, but to keep it constantly clean. It's just really neat to see how dedicated they are to keeping it pristine and very holy and uplifted. So at this point, if you want a review of where we've been, take a minute, look at this slide, see if you can answer the questions. If you can, you're doing really, really well. But we're going to keep on going. All right, so let's talk about how Islam spread. We talked about how Christianity spread so quickly because people were looking for a hope that if this life is miserable, we will have a better afterlife. They were looking for a religion that accepted them. Even women were accepted in Christianity, and so it was a loving, giving religion, and that's why so many people grabbed a hold of it so quickly, and it spread so quickly. And we're going to find out that very much is the same truth about Islam. Now let's look at the people responsible for spreading the new Islamic faith. It was a specific group of people known as the Bedouins, and they become the very first followers of Islam around 610. Now all of these people live in the Arabian Peninsula. This specific group were merchants that traded in Mecca from all over the place, and so they found the idea of Islam in Mecca and in Medina later, and they liked it. They were the group that liked it, and so they spread it to all these places that they trade with. Now the Bedouins, I don't really want to say they're completely nomadic because they do have these semi-permanent camps that they set up on the far outskirts of these major towns with their families, and they kind of come together for safety in the desert. It is a very, very hard life. These people still exist. The Bedouins have these temporary camps, and they live in the dirt and sand, and they have camels, and it is a really rough life, but it is their way of life. And so they are responsible for not only trading the goods of the time, but trading the ideas of the time, which included Islam. So if you've got this one group that really truly, very poor group, but they're the ones that started the Islamic faith moving out beyond the city of Mecca and Medina. We said that the Muslim empire expands very quickly. So look at this map. Now remember, 610 is when these Bedouins start really spreading it. Hopefully you're paying attention to the years at the bottom. So we're at 634 now. From 610, it's going to include the Fertile Crescent, Iran, the Persian Empire, and Central Asia. So look at this: 644, 49, 52, 55. Look how much it expanded in since 1610. I mean, my goodness, it is going to spread super fast. And of course, as we know, it's going to end up taking over most of Africa at one point. But this is just this little ancient world when it first starts, that you see it spread that quickly in just a matter of 50 years. It just so happened to be a good historical time for the people of Islam to attempt to spread this faith, because two things were happening. The Byzantine and Persian empires had grown weak for reasons that we will talk about later, but that weakness allowed Islam to really move in and take them over without much of a fight at all. Additionally, the second thing, people living in both those empires were being persecuted for different reasons, which again we will talk about later. But all these people were looking for something that would give them hope, a religion or an organization that gave them faith in humanity. And here it comes, Islam. So the story of Islam's birth and expansion, again, is very similar to Christianity. People are looking for a place to go to find hope and faith and equality. And Islam's going to give them all three of those. So it is going to spread across Asia, Africa, and into Europe. Eventually, it will be stopped right beyond Spain in a place known as Tours in France, which we will talk about later. But make sure you know Asia spreads into Africa, starts spreading into Europe, and it is stopped in France. So Spain is the only place in Europe that it is going to be located. But make sure you know those three things. Now, the fact that it spread is fantastic enough, but you have to think about the monumental barriers, geographic barriers that were in the way of this spreading. So you have distances of 5,000 miles that this religion spread across, and it was desert environments, mountain barriers, but the people persevered. The Bedouins persevered. They were used to that kind of environment and traveled across it and through it, and with it spread the word of Islam. Now, I'm not going to ask you the specifics of these deserts. I just want you to see how horrific the conditions were that the Bedouins fought through to get this new religion spread across the continent. So you've got the Arabian, the Sahara, and the Karakum Desert, and you can take a minute to see the extremes in each of them if you want to. So you've got one that goes from 120 degrees to freezing in a 24-hour period, one that has dust storms the strength of hurricanes, and one that has no rain whatsoever. These are giant deserts, and the Bedouins were brave enough and had the wherewithal to make it across them and to spread the word of Islam. So that's the deserts. What about the mountains? Let's look at the mountains. You've got the Atlas Mountains and the Zagros Mountains. Look how massively tall they are, and they still got across those. Now, as the Bedouins are spreading the faith, you've got Muslim armies who are also being developed and quickly taking over the Persian lands and the Byzantine lands, again, because both of those empires were weakened. So, two major cities that will be taken over are Jerusalem and Damascus. Jerusalem, like we've already talked about, is where they will build the Dome of the Rock. Now, Damascus is located in Syria. And the reason that they will eventually move the Muslim capital there is because at one point Muhammad was traveling through the empire visiting, and he stood on the outskirts of Damascus and claimed it to be a paradise, a Garden of Eden type of paradise. And so that is remembered after his death, and they decide when it's time to move the capital to a more centralized location, they would choose this place that Muhammad would have agreed with because he called it paradise, and that would be Damascus. Now, I talked about the fact that Europe was being, I don't want to say invaded, but Muslims were moving into Europe. They had taken over much of Spain. They're trying to get France, and there's a huge battle in a French city known as Tours. So the Battle of Tours in 732, that is where the Muslim progression is stopped in Europe and goes no further. And many believe that this is the battle, this single battle saved the true existence of Christianity in Europe. That may have been the end if the French and English that had come together to fight the Muslims had lost. Now the capital is going to be moved one more time, so from Mecca to Damascus to Baghdad in 762. Muhammad, of course, is long dead, and today Baghdad, of course, is located in the country of Iraq. Now, let's take a minute again. Can you answer all these questions? If you can, you're doing great. So if you want to freeze it and look at it for a minute and see how much of it you know, that would be great. I'm going to keep going. Let's take a look at the Society of Islam. Love this picture. Now, in economics, the Arabic language was getting more and more prominent in many places across the empire. As the Muslims take over, they start sharing and teaching the Arabic language, and it helps trade because if you can speak to people and make deals and bargains, of course it's going to help increase your trade. So they purposely started teaching others their language so that their trade would prosper. Pretty smart and forward thinking. Now let's look at the political development. Unity of the first Muslim empire, that's not going to last past the death of Muhammad. So they're going to split just like two other religions that we've talked about. Remember, the Hebrews were a united front until Jesus came along, and then they split into the Jews and the Christians. And then the Christians are a united front until icons come along because of Constantine. Oh my goodness, I'm losing my mind. Because of Justinian, and icons will split the Christians into the Catholics and the Greek Orthodox. So all these religions have splits. Let's find out why the Muslims split. Now, again, Muhammad he's going to pass away. And it really is a sad story. Let me sidestep here a little bit. So his goal had always been to take over Mecca, his home. And he wanted to share his faith with his home. So they had been fighting a battle with the people of Mecca, and they won very shortly before Muhammad is going to pass away. And so he and 10,000 others visit Mecca for the very first Hajj, and 3 months later, he passes away. He comes back to Medina and he passes away, and that's why he's buried in Medina instead of Mecca, because it was an all new thing having Mecca as part of the Muslim faith. So they didn't really have time to make his get his remains there and organize all that. So he was buried in Medina instead. So anyway, he's dead, and he has no male heirs. So the only male in the family is a son-in-law. So everybody is kind of okay with that. All right, we'll let the son-in-law, his name is Ali, we'll let Ali take over. Well, then Ali is assassinated. He is assassinated. And so there is no one else that's of age that can take Ali's place. And so a giant argument begins, and they decide that they're going to have to just elect somebody. And those who say, we're good with this, let's just elect somebody to be the new caliph, those are now known as Sunni Muslims. But there was a very, very small group of people that said that you should search the heaven and earth to find somebody who has some kind of tie to Muhammad. And that group, that very, very tiny group, is known as Shiite Muslims. And I don't want to make it sound like they're all bad, because they're not. It's a very, very, very tiny group. And if there is a rebellion group, it's probably a very tiny, tiny group of people inside that very, very tiny Shiites. Usually, if there's some kind of a rebellion, it's done by a Shiite group and not a Sunni group. I'm just talking about averages here. All right, so you have Shiite versus Sunni. Shiite believed you should have a direct descendant of Muhammad, that's about 10% of the population among the Muslims today, versus the Sunnis who think you should elect your leader through the community. So that's 90% of the Sunni, 90% of the Muslim population is some type of Sunni. And so they are a very large group. When you have some kind of, I hate to use the word terrorist, but I'm going to. If you have a terrorist action, it is hardly ever from the Sunnis, hardly ever. It is usually the Shiites. And again, I am not saying that 10% of the Muslim population is bad. It's like a very minute, tiny little portion of that 10%. If you're going to find a terrorist, it's going to be in that group 9 times out of 10. Okay, so here's the two things. Make sure they disagreed over Muhammad's successor, and it's going to create a schism between the Muslim groups. That's the big thing I want you to get out of this portion of the lecture. They disagreed over Muhammad's successor, just like Christians disagree or Hebrews disagreed over Jesus, and that will create a schism or a split between the Muslim groups. So let's move on to the next topic, and that would be social development in the Muslim world. So, according to Islamic beliefs, slavery is accepted. It is not going to be any different than in the Roman Empire. Slavery was not based on race, religion, or anything like that. Slavery was usually a punishment for some type of a crime, maybe somebody that they captured in battle, that type of thing. But it is not based on, it's not categorized by gender, race, creed, anything like that. Let's look at their golden age and some of the things that this civilization, this empire created. So, of course, we have architecture. They're very good at it. What is this building? Dome of the Rock. Where is it at? Jerusalem. I've said that like 3 times now, so it must be pretty important, right? They also used mosaics. Now remember, mosaics were very often used to develop icons, kind of by accident under Justinian and the people that followed him. But mosaics in Islam do not cause any problems. And the reason it doesn't cause any problems and there's no icons involved is you're not allowed to make people in the mosaics. So they have these gorgeous, gorgeous designs in their mosaics. You can have flowers or any kind of design, but no people. So that eliminates the argument of having icons immediately. Look how pretty that is. Now they do have, their language is Arabic, don't forget. They worked very, very hard in making sure that ancient texts like things from Hippocrates and Socrates and things like that, Ptolemy, all of that was translated into Arabic so that the Arabics understood Western progress, and then you're going to teach the West Islamic language, Arabic, and so it will make you more accepted, make you get along better. So Arabic is going to, or sorry, those Western writings are going to be translated into Arabic. Very important doctrines. Universities are also very, very important to Islamic people. As early as the 700s, these guys were opening up universities that were dedicated to just medicine. So they were the first people in the world to produce real learned doctors, doctors who used autopsies to discover the human body, where in the Christian world that was still taboo. You didn't touch a dead body for experiments or anything else if you could help it, but these guys were using it to progress in science and health. And so first universities for doctors. More great things include Arabic numerals. They adopted it from India, including the number 0. You can't move forward without 0, so this is a very important addition. They also gave us algebra. Maybe that wasn't such a great achievement. Algebra is not my friend. The coolest thing I think they did, besides all of this stuff, algebra and 0 and the first medical doctors, is the expansion of geographic knowledge, because the caliph used to pay experts to draw maps. Now, this is in the 800s. Here's one of the original maps that was done by one of these paid cartographers or map makers. This is Indonesia. So think about the time period now. This is the 800s. You don't have any way to look at anything from the sky. These guys had to actually get out in boats and travel and measure things and map it out that way. That is pretty daggone impressive. A view of Indonesia. I mean, I'm a history nerd, so I may have recognized it easier than some of you, but that's a pretty daggone clear, concise likeness of Indonesia done by, sitting in a boat on the water. Very, very good. So all good things must come to an end. Baghdad is going to be sacked by the Mongols in 1258. Now, it doesn't end the Islamic Empire, but their golden age, where they're continuously progressing, is done. They've already fought the Battle of Tours and were stopped their spread into Europe. And so after that, they just kind of sit still. All right, so that is the end of Islam. I hope you learned a lot. And in the next unit, we're going to talk about Africa. And Islam is very prominent in Africa. That's why I taught the idea of Islam first, so you would understand it more as we move into Africa. All right, so see you in the next unit, or at least I'll talk to you in the next unit.